This presentation is entitled Your Life Matters, but we're going to also learn a lot of stuff on today as well. First up, guys, let's give it up for our Deputy Coroner, Mrs. Allison Doubleday.
Hi guys, thank you. Like you said, my name is Allison Doubleday. I'm the Administrative Deputy Coroner for the Riverside County Sheriff Coroner's Office. I've been with the Sheriff's Department about 8 years. I started as a dispatcher, moved to the jails, and now I'm at the Coroner's Office. I've heard people die on the phone, I've seen people die in person, and now I respond to the aftermath of death. We have a population of about 2.5 million people. In my office, we have 2 locations, handles all of that. So we go all the way to Blythe, down to the Arizona border, Orange County border, and San Bernardino County border. So Deputy Coroner, what our job is to determine the cause, manner, and mode of death. So what we'll do, as you can see with the manners, they're classified based on the circumstances surrounding the death. Is it a homicide? Or is it a suicide? Was it an accident? Don't know. So that's our job, is to determine that. We must conduct inquiries into all suspicious and unnatural deaths and determine their manner and causes. We have the responsibility to investigate and report on all sudden deaths of persons within the county, particularly deaths resulting from all types of violence. California has established the types of deaths which must be reported to the coroner for investigation and review. Suspected homicide, suicide, related or following known self-induced or criminal abortion, or alleged rape or crime against nature. Any accident or injury, drowning, fire, hanging, gunshot, starvation, any exposure to elements, hot, cold, strangulation, aspiration, accidental poisoning, occupational hazards, OSHA, maybe you tripped and fell, something of that nature, exposed to something at work, contagious diseases, COVID, that was a big one, and all emergency room and operating room deaths. Therapeutic procedure, our office averages about 16,000 deaths per year. Medical case is where a doctor's going to sign the death certificate. They've been under regular care, so even though that death is reported to our office, we may not necessarily investigate that case. If the doctor cannot determine the cause of death, or they go, hey, they had a fall, or we think they relapsed, started using drugs again, I'm not comfortable signing the death certificate, coroner's office is going to get involved. So on coroner cases, the coroner, myself, will sign the death certificate. Our name goes on there. So some of the ways we determine cause of death is through an autopsy. We do not autopsy every person that comes into our office. Sometimes we will do an external examination only. So with jobs within the coroner's office, you have deputy coroners like myself. What we do, we are not doctors. Everyone thinks we're doctors. We are not. We're detectives, basically. We go out to the scene, we will talk to people, we'll investigate, and we will relay that information to our forensic pathologists, who are the doctors. They're the ones actually doing the autopsies. They will determine cause of death. And then we have our coroner technicians. Those are the unsung heroes, let me tell you, because they're the ones actually cutting open the bodies and helping our forensic pathologists perform those exams. So medical doctors, they do specialize in forensic pathology. On average, they go about another 6 years past regular medical doctor. So this morgue here, this is our Indio morgue. It's kind of small, and what you see here, we've got the autopsy bays right here. This is what we call our homicide suite. Everything's recorded. And this is our Perris location. We have 3 here. On the other side, we have 3 more bays. And then we have 2 autopsy suites, or homicide suites. And just some of the things we do, we'll do the x-rays, make sure there's no fractures, bleeds, anything of that nature. It helps our doctors, so that way sometimes we don't necessarily have to autopsy them. We can get the information we need from the scans. So these are some of the tools that we use. This right here, this one actually looks pretty fancy compared to what we use. Basically, bolt cutters is what we'll use to cut the rib cage open. This is used to open the skull. That's the saw for the skull. The big scissors, they'll use that for cutting tissue, things like that. So we'll do the Y incision to open up. And basically, that what we had talked about, the coronal incision is the one on the head. Okay, so before the bodies are brought into the forensic center, we perform our death investigation. So we are specialized investigators. We do have investigative skills. We are going to probe. We are going to ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, we're going to bug that person until it does. So what will happen is we'll get the initial call either from law enforcement, fire, paramedics, whoever, and they'll just let us know somebody has died. We will ask them certain questions. You know, is family present? It's really, really important for us. What kind of medical history do they have? Have they been under a doctor's care? Any signs of abuse, neglect, trauma, drugs, alcohol present at the scene? What about their prescription medication? Any signs of overdose, underdose? You know, so we're asking a lot of different questions to help us determine whether we are going to release that body to the mortuary so family can move forward with funeral arrangements, or if we need to do further investigation. So our other job is to identify decedents, notify next of kin, and safeguard property. All right, so we're going to start talking a little bit about certain characteristics of
death. Rigor mortis is the temporary stiffening of the joints and muscles after death. Now, that process can be sped up or slowed down depending on environmental factors. Is it hot or cold outside, humidity, or is there drugs or alcohol in the body? Another way to look at rigor mortis, how many of you guys exercise on a regular basis? Not me. How many of you feel that pain, that hurt in your muscles after you exercise? Or when you haven't exercised for a while and then you're feeling it? Guess what? That's rigor mortis. It's lactic acid buildup on your muscles. That's exactly what it is. It's the same thing. We don't break bones. It's just the muscle is separating. We just add force. So we're going to break what we call breaking rigor. And so basically it's just tearing the muscles. Lividity or livor mortis is the settling of the blood at the lowest point of gravity on the body. He was laying on his stomach like this. Does that make sense? Yes. That's pressure. All right, so these are the 5 types of death we have. We have natural deaths, okay? Heart disease, cancer, things like that. Accidental means traffic accident, drug overdose, things of that, slip and fall, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. So natural death. You're looking at this car, you're going, how is that a natural death? So what we're looking at here, again, you're still thinking traffic accident. Well, not necessarily. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did he have a heart attack while driving? This one did. So he had a heart attack, went unresponsive, and car crash. Yep, the big one's his, okay? And then the smaller one is a normal-sized heart. So his heart gave out on him while he was driving. So the car accident did not kill him. Heart attack did. And then we have our accidental deaths. I know you guys have seen all of these, unfortunately, on the freeway, on the roadway, and we had somebody playing a little too hard over there. The accidents. So intentional, most likely not, but we can usually rule that out, pretty quickly that, or did somebody crash into them? It's our job to do the investigation to determine really what happened. So yes, our office, a plane crash in the remote areas, actually a misdemeanor for anyone to touch a body till we arrive. So guess what? That body's staying in that plane till we get there. Law enforcement cannot touch that body. As soon as somebody is pronounced dead, it's automatically turned over to the coroner's office, and that whole scene is ours. Other accidental deaths, we'll have drownings. We have our dive team here. Again, one of our specialized teams that they will do the recovery. We do have multiple coroners that are on the dive team. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about drunk driving. I know you guys heard it. I'm not trying to sound like your mom. I'm just giving you a reality check of what happened. The other things we respond to are fire deaths. Those are interesting. I do specialize in forensic fire death investigation. So it's very interesting. We'll put it that way. Just seeing how the body responds to that. And that's where our forensic technology comes into play with DNA. We have a team that specializes in the unidentified program. We'll go into that more in just a minute. Again, could be an accidental death. Could be somebody trying to cover up a body. My job to figure out what. Homicides, I know you guys love those shows. Really old picture here, but again, there's only so much I can show you guys. All right, go ahead to the next one. So on this particular case, somebody notices, wow, that looks like blood or something gross coming from this van. What's going on? They call the police department out. Oh my gosh, we found a dead body in a van. It's a body dump. Body dump. And this was long enough ago that they didn't have cameras, everywhere. Everyone's got cameras now. So our job is, of course, to figure out what happened, how did they die, who did it. So our forensics team will go through, do all the trace evidence, things of that nature, fingerprint. My office does not do that. We simply focus on the body. We have a forensic team that they go in, fingerprint impressions, like I said, trace evidence, footprint impressions, anything and everything you can think of, way over my head, I will be honest with you, but they're very, very good. Here's some of the special assignments that we have. Our CERT team, love them. They told me because I'm doing this job right now, I can't do it, so I'm a little upset. But they're the ones that will actually go out to the remote areas. They're the ones rappelling out of the helicopters and bringing those bodies up, okay, on the mountainside. Very, very dangerous work. They are specially trained. They're very good, okay? It's kind of exciting, I'll be honest with you. We have our unidentified program. With this is really neat. We actually work directly with the LDS Church, Mormon Church. They have the largest database of DNA, blood, all of that. So they actually help us find out who some of these unidentified people are. I'll tell you a story. There was a baby found at Waste Management about 2 years ago. It was on the news. Somebody threw this beautiful baby away. Didn't think they'd get caught. Mama's in jail right now. We were able to get DNA from the baby. We contacted LDS Church. There's a thing called mitochondrial DNA, which is through the mother only, and it's passed down in the bloodline. For some reason or another, grandmother had blood on file in some kind of database, and we tracked down mom. Our forensic team and our unidentified team, very, very good. We have a lot of resources, so that was a huge victory. We have the administrative deputy coroner, that is me. It's typically an 18-month position. I get to do all these lovely courses. I walk people through the autopsy process at our morgue, and I handle all the high-profile cases such as officer-involved shootings, in custody deaths, or anything that's going to draw media attention. We have our child death review team, which I'm also a part of that. Any child death goes through this process, whether suspicious or not. We do sit with different members of law enforcement and prosecution through the DA's office just to make sure everything was done right. We do want to be an advocate for the children, make sure that they have a voice when they no longer verbally have one, make sure everything is okay. And then we also have the Domestic Violence and Elder Abuse Review Team, DVERT, also a part of that lovely team. Same thing, but again with the elderly. A lot of times we'll get reports of family members saying, hey, I think they were abused or what have you prior to death. And so we will investigate to the best of our ability to make sure that no one harmed them or did anything poorly to them prior to death. So, and again, as I was talking about with our CERT team, we do the hazmat cases. Those are always fun. Yes, we do suit up in those lovely bunny suits. We look just delightful. We do the remote extraction like I was talking about. These are neat. Skeletal recoveries. Really fascinating. I enjoy those. It's sad that we have to do it, but the beautiful part is we're giving family closure. We found your loved one. This is where they are, and they actually now have answers instead of wondering and having those sleepless nights. We do terrorism-related deaths, mass fatalities. Mass fatalities can be anything such as 9/11. We were on standby. Remember when the train over here was about to blow? What was that, about a month or so ago? We were on standby, just in case that's a giant bomb. It didn't happen. All that styrene, I think it was like 80,000 pounds of styrene, and the heat, yeah. So we were on standby, but thankfully nothing happened, okay? And they evacuated everybody. So even a bus death, the public bus or something like that, that's considered mass casualty, so we'll handle that. And of course, any complex death investigations, that can be any number of things. Forensic anthropology, we do have Deb Gray. She's known throughout the world for her work. She is our forensic anthropologist. She's amazing. She speaks way over my head on some of these lines and curves and things in the bones, but she will tell you right in it that fast, is that, human or non-human? Is it, old Native American? We get called out all the time when construction's being done on these Native American reservation sites. We just want to make sure, and then everything is stopped out of respect. Yep. So I don't even know what to call him there. I call everyone Bob. But anyway, here we are, just skeletal. I don't know what the circumstances are there, but what will happen is we will go through and do the excavation, and we will slowly dust off, like you guys have seen in the movies, and kind of reassemble the body in a body bag photograph and move forward from there. So just like I said, this is what we do, or Deb will actually do it, and piece as many pieces as we can together. We do have sifters. Basically, it's just like chicken wire, but just small, and we'll sift through, get all the dirt, and weed out the rocks, things of that nature. And before we go on to the next slide, I'm going to have my friend Michael come on up here with me. Do we have any science nerds in here? I am not one. Chemistry? Anybody? What's that? Chemical component of fentanyl. And I want to touch on this just a little bit. I know you guys have heard about it in the news. Has everybody been heard about fentanyl and the dangers of it? Anyone directly affected by it? By a loved one, or of somebody that's been affected by it? Yeah, it's dangerous. And do you think he knew about it? Well, what we're running into now, like we were discussing earlier, fentanyl is a legal drug in a hospital setting. It's a painkiller. I've been on it. Don't like it. It scares the crap out of me. Okay? You can get it, in multiple different forms. Usually it's through IV is the most common. But it's coming out on the streets, and it's being marketed to you guys heavily. And you can see right now how the progression. This number is not accurate as of right now. This is as of the slideshow when they made this PowerPoint, and the year's not over yet. And I promise you it's going to be higher than that number. And most people taking it don't know that they took it. So here, this is really important here. Oxycodone, legal pain medication. Okay. Adderall, somebody handed you one, would you know the difference? I wouldn't. Willing to risk your life by taking a drug that you didn't get from the pharmacy from a friend, that you don't know where they got it? Russian roulette. It will kill you in seconds. These are blue. They're coming out in rainbow colors now. Don't take that. The amount of fentanyl that it takes to kill you is equivalent to a couple granules of salt. And somebody might say, oh, well, my friend took it and they're fine. Yeah, do you know the consistency of that? It's not like taking a Tylenol or anything else that's regulated by the FDA, where you're getting certain milligrams or certain amount of whatever drug it is. They do not care about you. These things are made in large batches and churned. So you might be able to have one and you're fine. You took one from the same batch and you're dead within seconds. You guys willing to risk that? Narcan does not always work. And how many of you carry Narcan on you to help your friend out? I do, but I'm weird. Got it in my bag. But still, what I'm really trying to drive home with this, you guys, is they are marketing to you, your age. Have something that's going to be a downer. It's going to help you relax. Or it's something that's going to help you get you through the test. Help you study all night, keep you up. Yeah, your parents are going to come in, wonder why you didn't get up for school and find you dead. Nothing they can do. And it doesn't, with fentanyl, it's not your average quote unquote drug user. Sometimes it's just, oh, let me try this. I have a family that I worked with. It broke my heart. Mom's a trauma nurse, very educated. Family's very educated. His sister was a physician's assistant, medical throughout the whole thing. Raised, good family, good upbringing, whatever. Not what you would consider a drug family or anything of that nature. Does not fit the stereotype. But he was having a rough day and his friend gave him something. Mom and dad came home and he was dead. He knew better. He knew better is what she said. And now she's an advocate to get these deaths turned into homicide. And I'm very proud of her. I'm happy to work with her. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my friend Michael, who's going to talk a little bit more about the drugs and, you know, helping you guys make the right choices on this.
Guys, let's give it up to Michael Ortega, guys.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So just to give you a little bit of backstory, I'm 46 years old. I started using drugs and alcohol at the age of 12 as a coping mechanism to deal with, death of family members, certain traumas that I seen while I was growing up. So alcohol became my coping mechanism. At first it was cool, right? Just hanging out, chilling, drinking, smoking some weed and stuff like that. And then it progressed to the next drug after that, and the next drug after that, and the next drug after that. And people will say like, well, what was your drug of choice? Well, whatever you had, right? Like if I was hanging out on this side of town, whatever you had, I was doing that. If I was hanging out on this side of town, I was doing that, right? One thing that remained though was the alcohol. So commonly, we could go to any liquor store, doing beer runs, all that stuff, right? All the stuff that I thought was cool back in the days, right? All those bad choices eventually led me to making some really, really bad choices where I was looking at life in prison in 2007 for some violent crimes. It took a toll on me. It took a toll on me to see where my life had went. Going through high school, I played sports growing up. My mom and dad were there. I guess you would say like I was a bit entitled growing up. My mom and dad had good jobs. I just got like this wild hair up my butt, and I just went left. Just got caught up. I didn't associate myself with a particular gang. I would just say what they were doing was, gangster crap. Put the emphasis on the word, right? And it got really bad, really, really bad. Going back to what led me to prison, these violent crimes, right? For a long time, I thought I was too slick. I thought I was too smooth. I ain't gonna get caught, right? Doing all this stuff that I know I shouldn't have been doing. However, when you're on drugs and alcohol, right, your decisions, they're askewed, right? They're twisted, right? And think about it too, like right now, your guys' age, right? Everything out there, right, is an impressionable, right? Like what you see on TV, what you come home to, it leaves a lasting impression on you, right? Like how do we break these, for some of us, these generational curses that we've seen for so long, right? Well, my mom and dad did it. My grandma and grandpa, they still do it, right? So where do we get to a place to where we got to say, okay, enough's enough, right? And that comes from a place of healing, and I'll get to that later. Fast 2007, bailed out. I thought I was too smooth and too slick, right? I had these great connections. I thought I was the man, right? Working with bail bondsmen, to get me out of prison. I'm out of jail, excuse me. And during that time, so April 20th, 420, right? Picked up 6 felony charges, right? Prior to that, I had none, right? Because I thought I was too smooth, right? Bailed out. A month and a half later, I picked up 5 more felonies, right? Possession of loaded firearm, so, and I don't glorify that. It's just a piece of what I was doing, right? Stealing cars, robbing people, shooting at people, just doing stupid stuff, right? I picked up 11 felonies within a month and a half, right? So, got out again, bailed out 3 days later, and was out on the streets. Well, the first particular case that I had was with my cousin. Well, he got bailed out too, and he picked up an attempted murder while on bail. So during that 2.5 year process, right, we went to court one more time, and finally in 2007, the first deal they offered me was 5 years with 2 strikes at 85%. So I'm not taking that deal. It's crazy. Because my cousin did pick up that attempted murder, we went to court, and he said, my attorney told me, you know what, Mr. Ortega, you no longer have any deals. You have to take it to trial. And I was like, 10 years, because when you're in that lifestyle, you figure, hey, that's where it's leading to anyway, right? Like, I'm going to do some gangster crap, hey, it's going to lead me to prison. And hell with it, right? Making my money, doing my stuff, all that other stuff, right? So when they told me how much time they were going to give me, he said, well, you're looking at 60 years. And I was like, wait, what? 60 years? He said, yeah, 60 years. And they're not giving you any deals. Like, you have to take it to trial now. So fast forward, went to trial. It was one of now I look back at it, it was one of these traumatic episodes that I went through, because I'm literally sitting there hearing these people say all these things that I've done to them, and I'm like, man, oh well, hey, it is what it is, right? I was sentenced to 11 years with halftime with 3 strikes, and like the whole time I still wasn't, I was nodding out during trial, right? I was still getting high, still getting loaded, I was still getting drunk. I would come to court, literally hadn't slept in probably 2 days, right? Yeah, I was on a sick one for sure. Right? So, went to prison, still didn't learn my lesson. Like the first couple of years, I was getting caught up in all kinds of stuff still. Right? Like I would figure, man, I didn't come here to start following the rules now, right? Like I didn't come to church. I wasn't going to church on the streets, right? So why am I going to church in prison, right? Like stay with that gangster crap, right? Stay with that gangster crap, right? And it wasn't until a visit that I had. So mind you, I was in a prison, and by a raise of hands, or you don't have to, guys, but how many of you guys have a family member or know a family member that's in prison or been to prison? Right? Like you look around, right? That's a big amount of you guys, right? And just think of that, like the toll that person in your family has on you, right? Or that impact they have on you, right? Whether it be positive or negative, right? So I ended up in a prison down south in Centinela, and a really active prison. They had just got off of a really huge race riot right when I got there, and 2 months I was there, and another riot happened, and with a lot of stabbings, and I say these things is because, we see these things on lockdown, and we see these things on TV shows, right? But when you're in the middle of these things, it's scary. I don't care how many times that you've seen, some type of act of violence or anything like that. When you see somebody walking around or laying around with their guts hanging out, or they're leaving in, stretchers and stuff like this, it's scary. you know, and as you were sharing, like a lot of the stuff that I seen, like played back in my mind because I've seen things like this, you know, whether it be like on the streets or, you know, in prison, right? So 8 months, we went on an 8-month lockdown. So like, think about it like this, right? If you think you're like prison's cool, like lock yourself in a restroom and your restroom at home, right? And have a TV in there, right? Have somebody bring you your meals, right? Do your workout in there for 8 months. And I guarantee you, I mean, it ain't cool, right? Like I think I read probably like, I mean, over hundreds of books. But that stuff ain't cool, you know? So 8-month lockdown, right? At this particular prison, we'd get off of lockdowns and go right back on them, right? And you just got accustomed to that, right? Like I would always say, hey, you know, breakfast in bed and dinner and a movie. That's what I would say, right? Because you just get like so accustomed to that lifestyle, right? And it's sick. So we're coming off a lockdown, modified programming, and my mom and dad, well, let me go back. I picked up a dirtier habit in prison that I actually had in the streets because I started using heroin through IV, and yeah, it was sick. So had a visit, and I remember I was coming down really hard, and at that time my mom and dad would come from Riverside to Centinela, which is like 2 hours and 45 minutes. And mind you, my mom and dad had my kids, right? So I don't know, some of you guys that, you know, are from homes that are like that, where your family members are in prison and your grandparents are taking care of you. You know, that's a, I mean, for my kids, I'll never be able to tell them sorry enough. And right now, some of you guys may be feeling that, right? Like, and that's a whole other piece with my children that I had to come to a place of healing with them. And partly that's where I met Robert at. And I'll get to that too. So during this visit, my son's 25 now and my daughter's 27. And this was back when SpongeBob was hot, right? And so my mom and dad, they take my son and daughter to the visit, and I get out there and they have all this food, you know, this prison snack food and stuff, right? And I'm looking and my stomach's just turning. I'm like, oh, I can't do it, you know? So I have my daughter on this side and my son on this side, and they're like, hey, Dad, SpongeBob, yeah, you know, like reciting all the dang thing from SpongeBob, right? And the whole time my head's just dumping, boof, 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 boof. And I remember looking across the table and looking at my dad, and my dad just gave me that look like, no shame, you know, no shame. And he knew, right? Because that's part of the generational curse that, you know, I grew up in, right? My dad's clean and sober for years and years now. However, though, that still impacted my life growing up, seeing some of that when I was young. So my mom, I mean, she knew, right? She's looking at me and she's like, you know, oh, Mio, let me go get you a Snicker bar, or let me go get you a soda or something. And my mom and dad took off and left me with my kids. And the whole time I'm looking at the clock like, man, let's hurry up and just end now. I want her to just go back, right? And my visit was over and kissing my kids and my mom and dad goodbye. And I go back to my cell, and my cellmate, he had been there for some years too as well. And I remember him telling me, or him jumping off the bunk and telling me, you know, like, I should F you up right now. And I'm like, what? Like, what the hell's your problem? You know, I'm taking off my clothes and stuff, and I'm like, what's your problem? You know, he's like, man, I should F you up right now. I'm like, what are you tripping on? He's like, dude, he goes, there's people in this prison right now that would, you know, die happy if they were able to see their family like you do. Like, they would literally, I mean, die happy just to know that they've seen their family one more last time. And, you know, you go to these visits, your mom and dad are taking care of your kids, and you can't even be in your right state of mind to go, when they come visit you, like 3 hours away, like, what kind of crap is that? And I'm like, hey man, let's shut up, you know. And I'm taking off my clothes, like, all right, well, so we're gonna fight then, right? And he gets up on the rack, and he's like, you know what? He's like, man, you ain't even worth it. And those words, like, hit deep, like they resonated with me deeply, right? Because here I was, you know, in prison. You know, my mom and dad are raising my children, and they're coming and on a Sunday to spend time with me, right? While I'm in prison. So it's like they're rewarding my bad behavior, right? But they're still taking care of my responsibilities. So I thought about it, right? He's like, look, man, he goes, I'll tell you this, Mike. He goes, what if right now, like, they leave and they die on the way home, right? Like your dad crashes and they all die on the way home. Like, how are you gonna feel knowing that the last time that you've seen your family members, you couldn't even be in your right state of mind to see them? And that, like, that's the piece that hit me deeply, right? Because he was right. And after that, it still wasn't enough all the way for me to continue to change, like, the way I wanted to, the way I was going. It was a lot of things. It was another lockdown, right? And for me, my higher power, right? I prayed, and I said, all right, you know what? You know, these people that have an influence in my life, right? After we get off this lockdown, or excuse me, if you know the people that are influencers in my life, you know, I'll continue to go forward. So we get off another, I think this was like a 5 or 6 month lockdown, and I come out, and all the people that I was using drugs with, getting drunk with, stashing stuff for, you know, still doing the gangster stuff, right? We're gone, right? A lot of them, like, broke, right? They couldn't deal with the lockdowns or whatever the case was, right? They got taken out of there because of, for whatever reasons, right? So for me, my prayers were answered, right? And or my beliefs were answered, right? And I started seeing, like, you know what? I got to start doing some things differently, right? I was starting to build a relationship with my daughter, who is probably the same age you guys are right now. She stopped visiting me completely because she said, I didn't put him there. He put himself there. Why should I take my Saturdays and Sundays to go visit him? I didn't make the bad choices that he did. So she started having a lot of resentment towards me. That was a big piece of me wanting to start changing my life. Because I mean, I don't know if you guys any of you guys have children already, or your mothers, or know a family member that's, you know, early age mother as well. Like, I didn't want that for my daughter, right? And I didn't want my daughter to date anybody like me. So what do I got to do different, right? I got to start getting it together, right? I got to start working on it myself. So my verdicts were actually overturned through the appeal process. During the trial, there was some things that were done incorrectly. So I got out 2 years prior to the time that I was supposed to get out. And for me, I never looked back. I told myself that I didn't want to go back. And what I meant so much, I didn't mean so much as physically, but I meant more so emotionally and mentally. Because I know what led me to prison, right? It was the bad choices that I was making that led me to prison, right? So it was a long journey, I'll tell you that much, of like healing and, you know, processing things. And you guys hear those words and you're like, man, what the hell is processing and healing? What does that look like? What does that mean, right? Like, go see a therapist. Okay, well, that's a beginning to it, right? That's a piece of it. It's like really unraveling like the underlying variable of why we do the things we do, right? Like, we've learned some unhealthy coping skills in our lives. And oftentimes it's what we see and what we're accustomed to, right? And I know that was my case, right? Think about it, right? When your parents are in prison, right? Like, for me, the people that I work with and I volunteer with, I work with a couple of nonprofits from Los Angeles called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Initiate Justice. There's many of them that I work with, right? So what they do is they help individuals that are being released from prison to acclimate themselves back to society, right? And if you think about it, like those that have have received long periods of time, I mean, right now we're in a technology era right now where people like you guys probably got it down packed, right? Like you know how to do all these things on social media, like the internet, all this stuff, right? You gotta understand, like when people are coming home, like they've been in a time warp, right? So for someone to get onto a computer, it's like really foreign to them, right? Like I used to say, man, I don't even know how to work a damn calculator, right? And then working on these iPhones and stuff like that is completely, totally different. So going back to the piece, right, with the family members, right? Like an individual I work with right now, he's built up a lot of resentments and a lot of anger and a lot of, a lot of anger towards his parents because his parents were not there when he was young, right? So what he's seen was that generational curse of prison, right? Death, violence, drugs, all that stuff, right? Which led him to eventually going that route too, right? So sometimes, in my case, right, I was exposed to that, right? And my mom and dad, well, my mom's a normie, right? But my dad, he would call himself a functioning alcoholic or a functioning addict, right? Because he went to work. Well, I always tell him, I said, there's no such thing as a functioning alcoholic or an addict. Because something in that dynamic is amiss, right? And whether it be, you know, the relationship he had with my mom, right? The relationship that he had with me and my sisters, and then the work environment he was in. I told him, I said, you missed a lot of days because you were hungover, right? Like just because you were my baseball coach doesn't mean that, you know, you showed me the most ideal things, right? I've seen you argue with mom for some stuff that, you know, wasn't even a big deal, right? So there's these layers, right, to this piece of like the healing. And I go to this healing piece, right, because we say, oh man, I'm too bad for that, right? Like I don't want to talk about that stuff. Right? Well, you get to a point in your life where guess what? You're gonna talk about it, right? Like I don't know if you guys heard the term, like you're gonna mind somebody, you're gonna mind somebody, right? And unfortunately, you know, sometimes that's in prison, right? Like I don't like being told anything, right? I think that the staff here, I believe that the staff here is here because they really truly care about you guys, right? For some people, you know, we see them as authority figure, right? But you think about it like this, right? The ones that are here around you, right? They're still someone that you can go to, right? They're here for way more than just a paycheck, I'll tell you that much, right? Like Robert, for example, right? Putting together these events and stuff like that, it's because he truly cares. Like your principal told me earlier, right? Like Robert's like the lifeline, like the heartbeat of this campus, right? And these are the people that you want to attach yourself to, right? They say, you know, how you gonna, you know, how was it saying, the birds of a feather flock together, right? So think about it, right? Being unique is important, right? Being somebody different is going to be important to you in the long run, right? Like understanding that you don't have to follow the trends. You don't have to follow what everybody else is doing, right? And like she was sharing, right? What's going on right now is this stuff, right? Like everybody thinks it's cool to get high. You know what I mean? And you really don't know these days, right? You're playing like Russian roulette with your life when you're doing these things. The work that I do today, so I'm the program director of a residential treatment program. It still awes me today to where I'm at today because of my record, right? Because of my past. I deal with, you know, all walks of life, everyone, right? And they see me and they're like, well, what is this little, you know, fat Mexican got to tell me, right? What am I going to learn from him, right? He's laugh because it's true, huh? So, you know, and that's what I hear oftentimes, right? Because I'm dealing with, you know, artists and engineers and, you know, doctors, right? At my treatment center, right? Like everyone from, like, believe it or not, I've had pastors to police officers, right? Gentlemen that are just getting out of prison or females that are getting out of prison, you know, to, you know, probation officers, right? All walks of life, right? All of us, addiction doesn't discriminate, right? It does not discriminate. So where I'm at right now in life is a testament to me just not quitting, not stopping, stepping out of the box. Because I easily could have been, a statistic of my environment, right? The rates of recidivism, which is, you guys know what recidivism is? You guys know what that is? So recidivism is where the likelihood of you returning back to prison, right? So like if you don't have any type of like structure, foundation, right? Or you go back right into the same communities, right? The likelihood of you to going back to prison is high, right? Like what do you do when you get out, right? So going back to my role, work with all kinds of people, right? They come and like some will say, well, I don't have that big of a problem because I'm only taking, Norcos, or I'm only taking, some Xanax, right? And they think just because they're getting it prescribed from a doctor, it's a clean high, right? However, nowadays, you don't know what you're getting, right? You just don't know what you're getting from these people, right? So part of our program is to understand, why it is you continue to make the decisions that you make, right? I've seen people overdose at our facility, and I hadn't seen anybody overdose in years. And when you see that happen, I guarantee you it's gonna scare the crap out of you. Some of the things that we've learned, right? Again, like we learned, what to do in these circumstances, right? Because like, why do we know these things, right? Why do we understand these things, right? Like you were sharing earlier, right? About the Narcan. So I also too carry Narcan, right? Part of my work too is in outreach is, like you were saying, to go down to, the Santa Ana River. I make it at least a point to go down there at least once a month to share resources with those that are down there. And it's sad because a lot of the people that I sat in classrooms, or assemblies just like this are now down there. And I very well could have been one of them too, right? That's the path I was leading on. And, what do you do, right? It's like, man, hey, Mike, you've changed. Well, yeah, I hope so. Like we got to get to a point to where we grow up at some point, right? And you guys feel free, like if you guys have any questions while I'm sharing, please ask me, all right? Like for me, being open and transparent is important because this is who I am, not because I'm up here presenting, but this is also the person I am out there, and this is also the person I am at my treatment center too, right? I've found a passion, right? All my mistakes that I've ever had in life have led me to a career, right? Which I'm truly thankful because I'm able to provide, a sense of change for someone, right? One of my friends, he was one of the biggest dope dealers, but now he calls himself a hope dealer, right? If you guys need, any type of guidance, instruction, I'll make myself available to you guys through Robert. I don't want to take up too much more of your guys' time, but I appreciate you guys and thank you guys for letting me share.
So again, one more time, round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Bryan, for putting this together.